Okay, so recently I was looking at all of the books that I have in my wonderful collection, and I was starting to think about the fact that the end of the year is very fast approaching. If we take out this month, September, there are only 3 months left until we get to the end of 2020. Because of the fact that 2020 is coming to an end very soon, I've decided to spring upon myself 2 goals. Yeah, with 3 months to go. And I don't know how this is going to work, but I figure if I put it in a video, then I'm going to work my hardest to achieve set goals. So let's talk about goal number 1. And that goal is to finish off complete series that I have started. So I started my channel in January of 2020, and owing to that, I started some series along the way between then and now, and a number of them are still incomplete. To give you some examples, we have the Selection series. This is one of my favourite series so far this year, I can't really blame myself for not being done with this series yet, because it took until this month to get all of the books. So I had books 1, 2, and 3 prior to this month, but only this month did I get books 4, 5, and 6. I've read The Selection, book 1. I've read The Elite, book 2. And I've read The One, book 3. But I still have 4 books to go. So I'm already planning on reading book 4 this month, and originally I had planned to read book 5 next month in October. That would then leave 1 more book to read to complete out this series. This is doable, but I have to make sure I stick to it. Now, for another series that's not only doable, but I'm actually going to be able to complete by the end of this month, and that is the Reckoners series by Brandon Sanderson. So book 1 is Steelheart. I've read this already. Book 2, Firefight, I've read already. And Calamity, which is book 3, the third and final book in the Reckoners series, I'm actually currently reading, so I will be able to check off this series by the end of this month. This next series won't be so easy, and that is the Bloodline series by Rochelle Mead. So I decided to place a qualifier onto this goal that I have, and that qualifier is that I need to have at least read 2 books in that series by the time we get to the end of September 2020, and that will happen. In August of 2020, I read Bloodlines. In next week, actually, I'm going to read book 2, which means that this series does qualify. However, I do believe this to be a 6-book series. I could be wrong on that, but I think it is a 6-book series. And so because of that, I will have 4 more books to read over the course of 3 months. And normally, for a lot of people, this wouldn't be a problem, but normally for me, I like to read 1 book in a series per month. I'm happy to read multiple 1 book of multiple series in a month, but I don't tend to read multiple books in the same series that month. Generally, the reason for this is because I don't know if I'm going to want to continue on with the series until I've read the next book in that series. If it's a major flop, I may not want to continue with it. But this is going to be an investment of my time, to read 4 books in the space of 3 months of the same series on top of everything else. Is it going to be doable? Check back in with me by the end of December. Next, we have the Arc of a Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. So I read Scythe quite a few months ago, and I read Thunderhead I believe it was in August. And there's 1 more book to be read, The Toll. And good news, I received word today that I'm going to be receiving The Toll later on tonight, on the day I'm recording this. So I will hopefully add The Toll to my next TBR and then be able to finish off this series and close this one out. As for The Hunger Games, I don't know if I've actually publicly said this or not, but I've definitely been thinking it. I'm not going to be continuing on with this series So I read The Hunger Games, obviously book 1, gave it 5 stars. I read Catching Fire and I gave it 4 stars. And then I read The Nose Would Dive, Mockingjay, and gave that 2 stars. And this book disappointed me so much that I not only decided to leave the series there, but I no longer trust Suzanne Collins. So the Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, which is book 4, which is a prequel to book 1, I just have no interest in reading this book. Not only because Suzanne Collins has disappointed me, but I've heard what the premise is about, and it doesn't intrigue me at all. So with this series, I'm going to consider this series complete, and it won't qualify for this goal. However, the series next to it on my bookshelf, which is behind me, is the Divergent series by Veronica Roth. I read this book and gave it 5 stars. I read book 2, Insurgent. I don't remember what I gave this book, honestly, and there's literally only one more book left to close out the series, Allegiant. At the time of filming, I do plan to include this series as a part of my goal, so I do plan to read Allegiant by the end of 2020 so that I can close off this series. A couple of months ago, I picked up The Devil Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger. This is a book that was then made into a film, adapted into a film that I absolutely loved. And so when I found out it was a book, I decided to pick it up on a whim after DNFing a book, actually. So I didn't plan to read this book in the month that I did. It just replaced a book that I didn't finish. And I ended up loving this book even more than the film, which is saying something. There's only one book left in this series. I have that book. It's literally just there. I'm being really lazy. I should just grab the book. Revenge Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger. Now, I really, really loved this book. And when I found out that there's a book 2, I knew I had to read it. This is a duology. There's no third book in the series. So if I can just read this one book, I can close out this series as well. So I am including The Devil Wears Prada in this goal. I want to give an honourable mention to the second book that I read this year, Personal Demons by Lisa Desroches. There is a second book in this series. There might be more. I'm going to need to do some research to see how many books are in this series and see if it's actually possible to finish out this series with everything else that I plan to do. If so, then I will officially add Personal Demons to that list. If not, then I won't. So we'll see how we go. But either way, the final book series that I plan to complete is another Brandon Sanderson series, not surprisingly. Skyward. I read this book this month. I'll talk to you about it in my monthly wrap-up. This is currently a duology. I think Brandon Sanderson plans to write more than just 2 books, but currently there's only 2 books that he has published in this series. And I do have Starsight, which is book 2, on the way. At the time of filming, I don't have Starsight on me, but I've purchased it, and so it's on the way. Hopefully it will make it in time, and if it does, then I can read that book and effectively close off this series, or at least what has been published up until, I would say, the end of 2020 of this series anyway. In light of this, I obviously don't want to start any new series at the moment. However, there is an exception to that rule, and that exception is a series that I had already planned to begin months ago, and I always planned to begin this series in October, and so because of that, that series is locked in. However, I don't think it's feasible to imagine that I'm going to be able to complete this series by the end of the year. And this is the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. So I had a goal. I mean, we're doing a goal video here, and I'm referring back to a past goal that I had to read as much Brandon Sanderson as I could consume this year. The very first Brandon Sanderson book that I read, by the way, in case it's not obvious, is the one book that I've got displayed on his own shelf. Shows how much I love him. He has his own shelf. The Final Empire, the first book in the Mistborn series. After reading Mistborn Era 1, the first 3 books of that series, I grew to absolutely trust Brandon Sanderson and just wanted to dive in and read more and more of his works. eventually I got through all of Mistborn, 6 books split into 2 separate eras, and then of course I went on to read the Reckoner series and started the Skyward series, as I've said. But I always planned to get to the Stormlight Archives. This was something that I had planned before I began to read book 3 in the Mistborn series. So this was something I was planning in the end of March, the beginning of April, but it was something that I wasn't planning to read until the end of the year anyway. So there were, at that time, 3 books in the Stormlight Archives. The first book being The Way of Kings, the second book being Words of Radiance, and the third book being Oathbringer. So, this plan seemed like it was foolproof. In October, read The Way of Kings. In November, read Words of Radiance. And in December, read Oathbringer. And then Mr. Brando Sando, as I like to affectionately refer to him as, did what he always does. This guy, I don't know if he eats, I don't know if he sleeps, but it seems like he probably doesn't do either, because he releases like 4 books a year. And there are authors out there who release 1 book a year. There are authors out there who release 1 book every 2 years. Brandon Sanderson releases 4 books a year. And his books aren't short. I think the shortest Brandon Sanderson book I've probably read is The Alloy of Law, which is a 350-page book. The longest Brandon Sanderson book that I've read has been about 750 pages long, and all of the books in the Stormlight Archives are at least 1,000 pages long, which makes them double tomes. So Brando Sando, in his infinite wisdom of wanting to publish 4 books a year, decided that he's going to release the 4th book in the Stormlight Archives, which means that I can't complete the Stormlight Archives by the end of the year, because that would involve me reading at least 4,000 words of 1 series in 3 months. This is just something that's not going to happen. But I do plan on reading the first 3 books over the course of the next 3 months. Got all that? Great. So, to summarize, goal number 1, yes, this was all goal number 1. Complete series that I've already started, provided that I have at least read 2 books in that series by the end of September 2020, not including the Stormlight Archives. Now on to goal number 2 of 2 that I have to complete by the end of the year. So recently I have been spending time with my beautiful books, spending time with my bookshelves, having a lot of fun with them. Some people play computer games. Mr. Francy likes to play with the books on his bookshelf, and I have a lot of fun rearranging them and stuff like that. Anyway, I was looking at all of my books, and especially the books, so you can see the Brandon Sanderson shelf here. And below this shelf, there are 3 more shelves. The first one is split into 2 sections. On the right-hand side, I have fantasy books that aren't by Brandon Sanderson that I've read. On the left-hand side is a whole bunch of books that I have not read yet. And then there is another shelf below that which has a whole bunch of other books that I have not yet read. These are books that I purchased prior to April 2020. And they've just been sitting there and I have not read them. So, I probably have a total of about, I'm going to guesstimate here and say probably about 50 books that are just sitting there that I haven't touched since the beginning of April, and it's starting now to drive me a little bit insane. So, because of this, I have decided that I am going to start drawing from those books and including them into my TBR. So, my monthly to be read, my monthly TBR. So how is this going to work? Well, basically, I have selected about 20 books, it might be a little bit more, might just be a little bit less, that I have moved onto the shelf just below the Brandon Sanderson shelf, and I'm going to write down the name of all of those books onto a slip of paper and put them into a bowl. Then, with every monthly TBR that I do between now and the end of the year, I'm going to pull out a certain amount of those slips of paper, and those slips of paper that I pull out will determine at least some of the books that I will read that month from that selected TBR, because I need to get to these books. Now, you're probably wondering, but Mr. Francy, why do you have to read these books, especially when you're getting all these books coming in all the time? And it's true. It's just something that's ended up happening. If I were to guesstimate, I would say monthly these days, I'm receiving anywhere between 15 to 20 books a month. So why am I going back to books that I hauled prior to April? And the reason is because I have decided that at the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021, so it'll either be in December or January, I'm going to do a massive book unhauling. I want to get rid of books that I don't want to have anymore. And I feel like I need to give these books that I purchased prior to April 2020 a fair go. And I can't really give them a fair go if I'm just unhauling them without even reading them. So that's how we're going to do it. I'm going to have the bowl, I'm going to have the slips of paper, I'll pull them out, and I'll start going through these books that, to be honest, I've been saying for a while now, I hope to get to them in the future, but honestly, my thought has been, I don't think I will get to them in the future, so I'm going to force myself to do it, and we'll see how that goes. Obviously, DNF rules will be in effect, so if I don't enjoy the book for whatever reason, I'm more than allowed to just put it down and not keep reading it, and that's fine. But who knows, maybe I will... Even thinking this feels like book heresy to me, but maybe I will find a gem that's even better than The Final Empire. Oh, Mr. Francy, now you've gone too far. But maybe I will. You never know. I might find duds, I might find 5-star books. Who knows? So that's how we're going to keep things rolling here at Mr. Francy Reads in order to achieve those two goals between the beginning of October and the end of December. 3 months, 2 very hefty goals. These are tall orders to achieve. Will I achieve them? Won't I achieve them? Well, you'll just have to tune in to find out. Speaking of tuning in, I will leave that there and let you go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. You can tune back in because I post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, so I hope to see you again over there. If you enjoyed this video and want to continue to follow on with the progress of the content that I create on this channel, please like this video and subscribe, hit that bell, and hit all of those notifications. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and happy reading. Bye guys, bye!